At the beginning of April, I undertook a project with my students much like the project that we're doing for this course. I decided that my middle school technology class of 30 students would make digital stories. In order to begin this project, I laid out an Understanding by Design template so that I could identify what standards I wanted my students to meet and clearly identify their performance tasks as well as what they should know and be able to do. And I needed to know what I would need to do in order to get them there. I knew I wanted them to write stories and to be sure they used all of the important story elements like characterization, setting, plot, mood, conflict, climax, and resolution, yet I was unsure how solid they were on story elements to begin with, so I figured that would be a good place to start. I wanted to be sure there was plenty of choice for students as part of this project, as I knew they would be more engaged if they could have more ownership over the process. So the writing commenced. This part of the process actually took much longer than I anticipated, and I blame that on the years that have passed since I actually taught junior high English. I should have known better. I forgot how large the leap is from talking about story elements in theory to writing effectively and writing them into a story. Most of my students struggled mightily with this part. It took a lot of drafting, proofreading, and revising before they were finally ready to begin their story tables. Now, the story table part of this process was entirely new to my students, and it took a solid week of work, which included a lot of modeling on my part. A lot of the difficulty my students were having during this portion of the project stemmed partly from my inability to convey to them the idea of how this would be paced, and that during all the parts of this process, they would have to keep an image in their head of the final project kind of running the pictures through their heads. So I had a tutorial video on our class website that instructed students how to take pictures with green screen, and I also modeled the process for them several times using my green screen. For their stories, they were to set their scenes using backgrounds chosen from the internet, with them in each picture. Now, I insisted that they be in each picture since they were the main characters in their stories, and I wanted them to think of showing the action from the point of view of their character. Explaining it in this way was one of the first breakthroughs I felt like I'd made in this process. Once they understood what their perspective was, coming up with ideas for pictures not only became more clear, but it became a lot more creative, and I wish I had considered the importance of this earlier in the project. As they finished, they began the more technical stages of the project, taking photographs in the green screen area, using iMovie, doing voice recordings, and putting in music and sound effects. This definitely is one of the more complex projects I've undertaken with a class this size, but in terms of planning and management, I thought that went fairly well. Allowing a lot of choice in terms of the subject they wrote about, their voice, working at their own pace, getting feedback from others, the overall creativity that they were able to put into the writing and the pictures and the sound turned out to be a pretty positive experience. Students were engaged in the process throughout, and this alone eliminated a lot of the hassles that a more lockstep lesson plan can kind of create. Since I began this project with my middle school class at the beginning of April, I've also begun a similar project on a somewhat smaller scale with my high school Spanish class, and I'm starting to see so many possibilities in my courses for using this process and using digital storytelling as the primary vehicle for learning and creating. It offers the opportunity for students to really explore and personalize an idea and then creating their own meaning out of what they've learned. By doing this and creating an engaging digital story, they transmit their learning and their points of view to others. Most of the challenges I encountered during this project had simply to do with teaching this form itself. Digital storytelling was a new concept to this group of students, and in a way I can kind of equate it to when we teach kids the structure of a formal essay for the first time. Now that they have a better understanding of that structure, I anticipate that future projects won't have quite as many challenges in terms of understanding as this one did. From now on, I think they'll have a better idea about how to keep that visual story running through their head as they write, to convey mood, to take pictures and pace their stories. For me, collecting these stories is also something that will be really valuable to my future students. Having exemplars is really important. Learning to create a digital story is much like learning a new form of writing. Students need to first go through this process to really understand all that's involved and where to apply their creativity. And after that, it's more a process of honing their craft.
A rat from his perch in the branch. I ran inside to escape the annoyance and locked the door behind me. I thought I was safe, but all of a sudden the hedgehog burst through the cat door, still singing and dancing obnoxiously. The phone rang, so I went to pick it up, and it was my friend Joy. "Hi," she said.